Well, welcome to Redefining Airmanship, Session 5 of 6 in the series. And of course, this is your friendly co-pilot, Dave Cook. I'm going to work through this with you again this evening, and really glad you could all join us. I think you're going to get a lot out of this evening's session. Let's start out with that cockpit review, and also check out for those of you who have not attended before. I see a few new names on the list tonight. And by the way, you can get the prior 4 sessions of the webinar series from airmanshipexcellence.org. Just go to the Airmanship Excellence archives at airmanshipexcellence.org, and you can get all of those sessions that have been recorded. For tonight, if you want to collapse your control panel, you just hit that little white arrow in the orange rectangle. If you have a question or want to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on this raise your hand icon, or you can type in a text message and then send it to me. Also, if you don't have a microphone hooked to your PC, you can click on the button that the arrow is pointing to right now, and it will give you information on how to hook in with us via telephone. What we're going to cover this evening, it looks like a big list. There are a number of different topics, but unfortunately we can't go very deeply into any of them, but I think you'll find the breadth of the coverage tonight pretty interesting. Of course, we're going to review quickly sessions 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I do that for a couple of reasons. If any of you are as old as me, you probably don't remember 1 and 2. You might have 3 and 4 still in the memory banks, but you know, as I've mentioned before, it's a tenet of good training to provide repetition, and that's why another reason we're going over a review of these first few sessions. Then we're going to talk about airmanship on the edge, when it all counts, and we're going to look at some of the inhibitors and obstacles to achieving airmanship, and unfortunately there are many. And then for you instructors, we're going to talk about instructing and evaluating airmanship. But it's good for you, those of you who are not instructors, to listen to this section too, so you can see what your instructor should be providing for you in terms of airmanship development. Also, we're going to talk about understanding airmanship error, and that's not pilot error, that's airmanship error. And we're going to finally talk about the marks of an airman. What does an airman really look like? And this is a Wings program seminar, so you do get 1 knowledge credit for attending this evening. And by the way, I don't think I've ever mentioned before that I really think that the new Wings program has a lot to offer in terms of supporting your personal airmanship development plan. There are a lot of good resources in there, online resources, short courses, and so forth. I don't think it quite can do the whole thing all by itself, but it sure can be a part of any personal airmanship development plan. And of course, I want to bring your attention back around again to the big question: if I don't fly right, should I fly at all? So I'm going to talk about that again some more. And the series is based on the book Redefining Airmanship by Tony Kern. Again, I highly recommend that you get the book. Amazon carries it, I know, and read it cover to cover. All right, let's go through this quick review, and we are going to move through it quickly. As you'll recall, in Session 1, we talked about the bedrock principles in Kern's airmanship model of discipline, skill, and proficiency. And then in Session 2, we talked about the pillars of knowledge that rest upon those bedrock principles, and those pillars of knowledge are self, aircraft, team, environment, and risk. And then in Session 3, we talked about the capstone outcomes that rest upon the pillars of knowledge. And those capstone outcomes that we're looking for are ever-improving situational awareness and better and better judgment. So that's the Kern airmanship model. And again, I really advocate that you study this model closely and start trying to fit in your thinking around your airmanship development in terms of this model. And we'll get into that in the next session in detail, but I'd like to try to get you to start thinking about that now. Well, of course, back in Session 1, we came up with a shared definition of airmanship because we pretty well agreed, and all the people we heard from in the presentation agreed that there really is no common definition of airmanship. So we agreed to have one for our purposes here. And pretty much that definition went something like this. Expert airmen possess discipline, skill, and proficiency. Expert airmen have a thorough understanding of themselves, their aircraft, their team, their environment, and the risks they face. And expert airmen consistently display exceptional situational awareness and use good judgment at all times. So that's our shared definition of airmanship. And of course, we talked about situational awareness, which is a very important part. You can't really have good judgment without good situational awareness. And we define situational awareness as it's the accurate perception of what is going on both now and in the near future. And of course, we use that FAA Venn diagram to kind of give us a visual picture of what SA is. And it's if you have SA, you're at the confluence, if you will, the focal point of what has happened, what is happening, and what might happen. And then capping off the Kern airmanship model, we spent quite a bit of time talking about judgment. Kern says good judgment sits at the pinnacle of airmanship. All other factors, discipline, flying skills, knowledge, and SA, support good judgment. Good judgment, in turn, supports all three major goals of airmanship, one of them being safety, effectiveness, and efficiency. Judgment, like all other aspects of airmanship, must be viewed holistically as an interactive part of the airmanship whole. So, we sometimes get the impression that we can learn judgment like aeronautical decision making. FAA puts out some good guidelines on that, some good training materials, and all that is part of it. But judgment does not stand alone. You can't just train to good judgment. You have to be practicing all of these elements of the Kern airmanship model in addition to that. Judgment is demonstrated in almost everything an aviator does. It includes adequate mental and physical preparation for flight, includes briefings and debriefings, and critiques. As the pinnacle of a complex human equation, understanding and improving judgment requires a solid foundation of airmanship knowledge and a process for study and improvement. You have to have both of those. So that's why we've spent so much time so far going over the foundation of airmanship knowledge, and so far in the seminar series. And in the last session, Session 6, we'll focus on that process for study and improvement. Kern has some more comments on judgment. The foundations and pillars of knowledge of airmanship form the basis for good judgment and decision-making. All good judgment and decision-making is grounded in accurate situation assessment. You'll recall we talked a lot about that situation assessment. I went into detail on that. Judgment is not a magical quality. It can be taught and learned. The improvement process demands disciplined attention and constant self-critique, and that's the hard part right there. In the final analysis, our judgment is as good as we want to make it. And that's really true. There are no limits to it. But the only thing that limits it is the effort you put into it. And remember, we talked about safety cultures last time in Session 5. Effective efforts to achieve safety must recognize the importance of culture. One size does not fit all. Organizations must have a full understanding of cultural influences on their operations if safety efforts are to succeed. So the organization has to be built in a way that it's sensitive to all of that. And culture surrounds us and influences the values, beliefs, and behaviors that we share with other members of groups. We're talking about organizational requirements for a safety culture. There are some basic conditions that must be met to have any chance of success. Those are trust, a non-punitive policy toward error, commitment to taking action to reduce error-inducing conditions. So you have to have all of those things if it's going to work. And looking at organizational requirements for a safety culture, a few more bullet points. Diagnostic data that show the nature of threats and the types of errors that are occurring. Remember, we talked about that Vision 1000 system, a flight data recorder, so you can collect that data in a way that you can diagnose it. And then you have to have a system for identifying the threats and the errors. So that's all part of what we talked about in detail. Training in threat recognition and error avoidance and management strategy for pilots. You have to have that in a safety culture. It has to be formalized. It has to be well thought out. It has to have like a curriculum. Training in evaluating and reinforcing threat recognition and error management for instructors and evaluators. And actually everybody in the organization has to have some of this kind of training, but the instructors and evaluators have to take it to a little higher level. And we talked about safety management systems last time. A safety management system, or SMS, is a critical component of a safety culture. SMSs are becoming a standard throughout the aviation industry worldwide. SMSs are recognized by the International Civil Aviation Organization and civil aviation authorities worldwide, including the FAA. And Administrator Babbitt has a few things to say about safety management systems. Saying that you don't have time for SMS is the functional equivalent of saying that you don't have time for safety. Babbitt characterizes SMS as you identify the problem, you analyze it, you come up with a solution, you train to the solution, and then you check how you're doing. It's a safety feedback loop, and that's again, I mentioned last time, that's the best definition I've seen so far of a safety management system. It's very concise, but it covers all of the points. So there are some tools that can be deployed in safety management systems, and some of them, that we touched on, focus on airmanship development, use fun and aviation-related social activities to promote safety, fly technically advanced aircraft, use all the modern safety features in those aircraft. We talked about the fact that you need comprehensive airmanship training in the organization and as one of the tools in a safety management system. And that training has to include very good, thorough, comprehensive initial training, then frequent, recurrent training, and appropriate upgrade training to increase your level of airmanship. So it isn't just upgrade to a different airplane, it's upgrade to a higher capability in your airmanship levels. And you need to use all the modern training techniques like part task trainers, simulators, and of course modern aircraft for training. Comprehensive airmanship training should also include the use of print media, digital media, computer-based training, online learning, classroom instruction, and one-on-one instruction. And comprehensive airmanship training and the data collection, both of these need something like that Apereo Vision 1000 so that you can download the flight. And this is super for self-critique. I was just thinking about this on the way home from Glass Simulator this evening. I'm going to be out there all week giving initial training courses on Cessna 300, 400 series aircraft and using the sim for that. And I got to thinking about, replaying the lesson and and the more ways you have of looking at that lesson, the more perspectives you have, the more you can get out of that one lesson, and how efficient that is, and what a cost saver that is, and how everybody could reach a higher level of training, higher level of airmanship because of the training, but also because of the self-critique that's available with a system like this. And I think it's just going to be fun to fly a flight and then at your leisure sit down and call it up and take a look at it from all these different angles, and you'll see things you didn't see. So at any rate, I think those types of systems are a must in any safety management system. And of course, you could have an alert system in here so that flight safety management can be following trends. We talked about that. Well, that's critical to a safety management system. All right, then we talked about glass cockpits are a very important tool to be deployed in safety management systems, like even in LSAs or very small aircraft have glass cockpits, and also in the traveling airplanes like the Ciceros use glass cockpits. But again, important thing, two rules that have to be followed. comprehensive and effective initial training and comprehensive and effective recurrent training on those systems. And we also think that in the safety management system, any good one, you deploy tools like advanced flight safety features, including ballistic recovery systems, satellite tracking system, head-up displays, airbags, and satellite phones. We're also, as I mentioned, I think, my opinion, and again this is up for debate, I chatted about that a little bit, that we need to have a real good live seminar where we can debate whether or not these glass cockpits really can improve safety, because the jury is out statistically right now. But I'm working with two people on this Cessna 340 initial right now, both in their mid to late 20s, about a little over 2,000 hours. They're flying professionally. One is a flight instructor, one is a corporate pilot in a Cirrus. The flight instructor has several hundred hours in G1000 time in a Skyhawk, and she's taught a lot of G1000, and the young man has got a lot of time in that Cirrus with the G1000 perspective system, about 700 hours. So this is the first group of that generation I've had a chance to really spend time with to talk about how they feel about the glass cockpit. And I don't have a whole lot to report to you at this point. This was our first day, but I can tell you that they really prefer it. They don't like flying without it, without glass, and they seem very comfortable with operating the glass. So I think that it is, if you get used to it, like anything else, if you're trained properly, get used to it, it's really a pleasure. It ups the pleasure of flying, and it also enhances that safety considerably. And also things like enhanced vision systems, so you can see through the dark, very important for us older guys. And we also believe that any airmanship development support organization should have a flight ops support team that includes flight planning support, flight dispatch, flight tracking, and in-flight support. So that's a very quick overview of the last 4 sessions, which was 4 hours altogether for the full sessions. So if you have any questions, comments, anything, please raise your hand now, or you can send me a text question. And I'll give you a couple minutes to see if anything comes to mind. Okay, looks like everybody's satisfied with that. That's good. Now we're going to move into the new material. First thing we're going to look at is airmanship on the edge, as Kern calls it. And it's the total airmanship package in action. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where Maverick starts doing some of that pilot stuff. This is it. This is where this all pays off. Cervantes said about this sort of thing, the man who is prepared has his battle half fought. And if you think about how that applies to airmanship, it's probably more like if we're prepared, we have the battle 99% fought, because our training can be effective. And anytime I've been in a situation where I had to automatically fall back on my emergency procedures training, it's always worked. So we can rely on that as long as we have discipline and we diligently improve all of those skills and those memory items, that knowledge area. Kern has to say about airmanship on the edge, aviation is ideally suited for heroes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up as a very young kid, from 10 years old on, watching TVs. They were brand new then, and most of the later evening programming were World War II propaganda fix, and most of those had John Wayne in them. And most of those had John Wayne flying fighter airplanes. So I wanted to get into aviation when I was a young kid, to be a hero. And I think we all kind of harbor a little bit of that, but it's not so much ego as we become adults, as we wonder if we could meet that test if it ever shows up on our doorstep. So I think that hero thing is in all of us, but not from an ego point of view. And as Kern says, aviation is ideally suited for us. It's one of the reasons we probably got in this, didn't even know it. Kern also says ultimate airmanship under extreme conditions describes airmanship on the edge. It's the ultimate airmanship under extreme conditions. Also, circumstances so severe that anything less than the total airmanship package would have been insufficient. And we're going to look at one example of that here, a case study in a bit, but I'm sure you can think of many that you've read about over the years where this is really true. You know, the circumstances were so severe that that pilot or those pilots had to pull out every trick in the airmanship bag to make it work. And that was just barely sufficient to pull their tails out of the fire. So it's a very true statement. Here's a personal view from a guy named Jim Simon, who is Air Force paved low pilot. Now, I'm an old Army helicopter pilot. I flew some pretty big Army helicopters, but every time I see a picture of this guy, I just, boy, I sure wish I could fly that. That's just a mean-looking helicopter. In aviation, Major Simon says, in aviation, you never know when or where your next trouble is coming from. Can I get an amen to that? You never know where your next challenge will come from. And that's not just the bad kind of challenge, it's the good kind of challenge too. So that's one of the reasons I believe that we all have a passion for aviation, because those challenges, we respond to challenges and they keep popping up, and if we fly a lot. And if we're not flying a lot, we don't get those challenges, and it's kind of a chicken egg, because if we don't have challenges, we're not going to fly a lot. So that's why we think we have to get focused back on some easily reachable, fun challenges for everybody to get going again. Okay, here's the first case study about the airmanship on the edge. Now, Kern has several of them in Redefining Airmanship. So again, that's another good reason to read the book. They're all very interesting, and they get the juices flowing, and you know they're really good case studies, and they reinforce the things we're talking about here in this webinar series. But here's the case study. United Flight 232, and I'm sure we all remember this one. DC-10, total loss of all flight controls, crash landed at Sioux City on July 19, 1989. And it was the captain of the crew was Captain Al Haynes, and Kern looked at him. He looked at this case, and he said, Al's airmanship closely parallels the model, Kern's model. And I would agree with that, because he's a United pilot. We were all out of that same cookie cutter after we were there for 10 or 15 years, and it was all that airmanship focus. And I never flew with Al, but I flew with a lot of guys who did fly with Al before this happened, and they couldn't speak more highly of Al as an airman. So, and Kern, this is Kern's analysis too. Now, I've got to tell you a little. I got to show you the personal side here. When this happened, I mean, actually, when it was evolving, when they were on there wandering around a bit, and then finally aimed it at Sioux City and smacked it on the airport, which is a miracle. I can't believe they did it. I was flying as a co-pilot on a United Airlines DC-10 from Chicago to LA, and I was virtually directly south of Sioux City when this was going on. But I didn't know it was going on until I landed in LA. When we landed in LA, it was a turnaround. We had an hour or so, we were going back to Chicago, and walked into dispatch, and of course that was the buzz. Everybody was talking about it, but the details were few at that point. But they did know that the center engine had blown, and they did know that he had total control loss. And that's about all. And they knew that he crashed, and they knew that some people got out, and that's about all they knew. So I tell you, it was a real soul searcher for me to climb back on that DC-10 and go back the other way, because they really didn't know what happened. And if I was at the age I'm at now and the experience level I'm at now, I probably wouldn't have gotten on that airplane. Because if you do a real good risk-reward analysis of that kind of a situation, are you going to take this risk? I think, at least when I think it through today, my answer comes up, sorry, I'm not going to get back on. Sorry about that. Somebody's got to you got to make up your own mind about that stuff. But at any rate, that's how close I was to it. And I always remember, after this happened, every time you bumped into another DC-10 guy and got to talking about this, one of the things that always came up was, hey, when you were in ground school on the 10, did somebody ask what happens if you lose all three hydraulic systems? And everybody would say, yeah, I remember that question came up. So I'm of the opinion that every ground school, DC-10 ground school class of United, somebody asked the question, what happens if you lose all three of those triply redundant hydraulic systems? And the answer was always, can't happen. It'll never happen. Well, there it is. It happened. So you can't be too prepared. That's the bottom line of that story. But you'll enjoy, if you haven't read through the story of this case study in a while, you'll enjoy it again. It's just amazing what those guys did, that crew did. They were each individually excellent, excellent airmen. Here's what Kern has to say about airmanship on the edge. The case study illustrates two prerequisites for a hero to step forward: readiness and opportunity. So if you're ready, you couldn't be readier. And of course, all older airline captains strive to retire with no more opportunity, but they stay ready, and just in case the opportunity presents itself. And so if you are not ready and the opportunity presents itself, you're not in a very good place. If you're ready and opportunity never presents itself, you're in even a better place. In aviation, one does not choose the opportunity to excel. It chooses you. So let's look now at some of those inhibitors and obstacles to achieving the airmanship level that you are pursuing at any particular time. Remember, that target has to keep moving out away from you. You're never going to get to be the most excellent supreme airman. You might be the best airman of all of us, but you'll never be perfect. It's just, I think, impossible in this game. So that's, again, I think the good news for those of us who have a passion for flying, because part of that passion, I believe, is the challenge. We'd like to respond to the challenges. So there are inhibitors, though, so we have to be aware of them and do our workarounds. Some anonymous dude said, do you see difficulties in every opportunity or opportunities in every difficulty? And of course, to make life go smoother, that second option is the better one, but to make it go smoother in the cockpit, that's a better one. If you start letting problems with the controller and not giving you quite what you want, or you think he's not treating you right, or whatever, and then you start feeling, boy, that's a difficulty. Now you're not going to learn. You're going to distract yourself. If you turn around the other way and say, wow, okay, that bad communication situation just went on. I didn't get what I wanted from the controller. He sounded he didn't like what I was doing. So here's the opportunity. When I get on the ground, I'm going to call up the center and I'm going to arrange to talk to him to find out what he was thinking, because I want him to know what I was thinking, because that makes us better, me a better airman and him a better controller. So opportunity rather than difficulty. Kern has to say about this, if perfect airmanship were easy, everyone would have it. Isn't that the truth? Unfortunately, there are many obstacles and inhibitors to effective airmanship. They must be identified, understood, and overcome or avoided if we are to reach our potential as airmen. So Kern helps us identify a lot of them in the book. There are other, I keep quoting Kern, there are other people talking about this, other books out now, other media that provides more and more of a knowledge base about all these things, airmanship things we're talking about. So we've got a lot of them, a lot of the inhibitors and obstacles identified. And I think we understand most of them. So then it comes back to personal commitment and discipline to overcome or avoid all of these inhibitors or obstacles. But it's all doable. Here's a personal view from John Lauber. Now, if you've been in the industry a long time, you've been flying for a long time, you probably remember hearing about Lauber all the time. He was the chairman of the NTSB for years and years and years. I remember back 60s, 70s, and a long time, somewhere in there. But then after that, he did like most of them, through the revolving door, and went over and he was VP Safety and Compliance for Delta. So Lauber always has been, to my knowledge, a well-respected authority on accidents, aviation accidents. Here's what he says. Habit patterns that are reinforced in day-to-day operations are far more likely to be second nature in flight. So checklist uses, as an example. If we just get real good at it while we're going through some training, or we're trying to pass a check ride, and then we don't use it in our day-to-day flying, we're not reinforcing it, that we're going to lose that habit. And I just watched these young folks today, and boy, I hope I never slip and give you their names, but one of them on a single engine approach, a little bit of load up on the task, a little bit of task load, and landed with the gear up. So, habit. Use the checklist all the time, because if you don't have it in a habit, you're not going to use it when it's critical, time critical. All right. Also, Lauber says, that's the goal, safe and effective operations at all levels. And I would concur. That's the goal we're looking at through all these things we're doing. That's the goal I hope you're looking at, is safe and effective operations at all levels. The principles of cockpit resource management need to be taught from day one, if not sooner. So if you have been trained in a typical training program for general aviation, you probably have not had much exposure to CRM. If you've been through a university program or maybe an academy, maybe you've been exposed to it, but probably not really immersed in it. And it's like everything else, the sooner you learn it, the better. And that's really the best way. However, I was in my 14th year with United, I think, as a professional airline pilot, before I went through my first cockpit resource management training, because that's when it finally got introduced to the airlines. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. Some old dogs take a little bit longer to learn it, because it is kind of a culture change. It's a change in attitudes and values and so forth. So it's a little difficult the older you get, but you can still do it. It's training. It's like any other kind of flying, it's training. Here's what Kern has to say on the inhibitors and obstacles. The lack of personal motivation to understand and improve stands out as the single largest obstacle to improving situational awareness and judgment. So Kern's saying that lack of motivation, the motivation to understand and improve yourself, that's the thing that gets us. That's that inhibitor and obstacle. That's the big one. All by itself, it's the biggest one. And if we don't improve, we're not going to have better situational awareness and judgment, and we're after that. Until the desire and discipline to systematically improve, and I underline that, systematically improve, all areas of airmanship is instilled, developing these critical capstones to their maximum potential will remain beyond reach. So discipline is in there, systematically is in there, all areas of airmanship, and you've got to do all of that to make this work. All right, let's focus here for a second. I'll speak directly to you CFIs. If you're a CFI, please raise your hand for a second. Let me just see how many I have in the room. Okay, I'm only seeing one hand, Andrew. Either the rest of you guys fell asleep, or you're no other flight instructors here on the webinar. Well, I'll speak to flight instructor, and because that's what you non-flight instructors should be hearing, what I'm telling the flight instructors about airmanship training and evaluating. Here's what Robert Corrigan, who is president of San Francisco State University, and he's an expert in these areas, not aviation culture and so forth, so much as education. He says the greatest challenges facing education are how to navigate the perilous course between adventure and discipline. And I think Kern picked this out. He quotes this in the book. And I think he's right on, this quote, because, we're looking for that adventure. But we have to have that discipline to keep the adventure within the boundaries of the acceptable risk that we're willing to take. So you got to have both. It's a balance in there, at least for us as pilots, I believe. Kern says, the flight instructor or evaluator is at once a resource provider, a black hat evaluator, a motivator, and an evangelical enthusiast for airmanship. So this is my first big sales pitch to you instructors, and I would ask all of you non-instructors to pitch this to your instructors. If this airmanship idea is going to work and help us all in the ways we've been looking at, every instructor has got to get on the bandwagon and teach airmanship. It's all, you know, I'll give you an example in the extreme the other way. We all know instructors who have the old attitudes about safety cultures, about FAA regulations, about airplanes new versus old. And if you agree with me at all on what I've been saying here over the course of these webinars, then I think you'll agree with me when I say those guys are not thinking straight. That's not the right kind of thinking that they should be passing along to other pilots, because they're looked up to by all other pilots, flight instructors are, and you know, in a lot of cases they're mentors. So they've got to change their attitude from that, kick the tire, light the fire attitude, and well, I don't need to have a lesson plan to give you a lesson. I've been teaching people to fly, and oh yeah, that airmanship stuff. I heard something about that. Boy, what a bunch of hooey that stuff is, Some old retired airline pilot spouting off like he knows what he's talking about. So those attitudes are out there right now, and we need every instructor to flip this other way and start talking about airmanship as a positive solution to not only our personal, the re-energizing of our personal passion for aviation, but also making us better and safer pilots. And Kern also says the instructor must explain the big picture of airmanship, and that's what we've been going through here, the big picture of airmanship, and instill a motivation for achieving balanced and continuous improvement across all areas of airmanship. So the instructors have to be the motivators. And, of course, goes without saying, the instructor must model and teach airmanship. He can't say, do this, and then fly a whole other way. He's got to model it. Here's a personal view. Captain Al Mullen. Al is MD-11 captain for FedEx. That's why I put the picture up there, but he doesn't. His real claim to fame is he's president of Crew Training International, which is a pretty good size airline flight crew training and sourcing operation. And Al's been around a long time. He knows his stuff. He says, I see us moving to a fully integrated approach to flying, one that incorporates all aspects from basic flying skills to complex human factors into a single training approach. And that's what I've been saying about this integrated, comprehensive training woven throughout the safety culture and part of the safety management system. All of it has to be integrated. The training, the non-training when you're out flying, the self-critique after the flight, all of this stuff has to get woven together into a seamless cocoon, if you will, that we can rely on and we can use to get better and better and better all the time. And Kern Mullen also says the organizational and regulatory cultures are beginning to support this shift. And by that he means it took a long time for safety culture, safety management systems to get to the point where they are now with the airlines, where they've driven that accident record way down to 0.15 accidents per 100,000 hours flown. They had to go through these processes to get there. So that's what he means by beginning to support. There's still a ways to go in that world too, in terms of safety cultures. And also the shift has started to take place in the charter operation world and Part 135, and we're seeing that. So they're starting to support the shift, and we've seen the statements that Babbitt has made about SMS is good for everybody, and as I mentioned earlier, to me that looks like handwriting on the wall. So I've got, hang on just one second, I see a question here about technically advanced aircraft. And it just says that, though, so it must be suggesting we talk about that. We're going to get to that in a minute. And Kern on instructing and evaluating airmanship. Above all, airmanship must be taught and evaluated as an integrated system. So we can't just, that's one of my complaints about aeronautical decision making. It's pushed strongly by the FAA in the training area, which is excellent. Instructors are encouraged to train students in how to do good aeronautical decision making, but I'm still seeing that the implementation is still pretty thin, And we haven't integrated it completely into the check rides, into the evaluation. I know some DPEs have more than others, but all of it has to be integrated together, the checking and the training. The role of the instructor in airmanship development cannot be overemphasized. I agree with that 2,000%. Habit patterns are easily established early in an aviator's career. They are far more difficult to change after we have become hardened to experience. So we want to start training this way right from the beginning. And we're not talking so much about age as how you start your flight training, your training as an airman. All right, let's shift a little bit to understanding airmanship error. Now, this is not, again, pilot error. This is airmanship error we're going to talk about. Stephen Kuntz, I imagine most of you have read probably most of his books. This is a quote out of one of them, Minotaur. Eventually, you are going to make a mistake. That's a given. The trick is not to make it a fatal mistake. So there's a good, I think, maybe a folksy way of describing airmanship. Okay, we're all going to make mistakes. We know that. We just have to be good enough that we aren't going to let it be a fatal mistake. We're going to have all those skills. We're going to have all those techniques. We're going to have all that awareness so that we're going to see those fatal mistakes coming, where that mistake that we just made is leading, and be able to stop it right there. Take that link out of the error chain that would lead to the fatal mistake. So Kuntz says it a little bit differently, but that's really what we've been talking about in terms of what airmanship is. And Kern, talking about understanding airmanship error, says the great Roman philosopher Cicero declared that it was in the nature of man to err. 20 centuries of human evolution have not weakened the strength of the great man's observation. To improve airmanship, however, we must deal with our mistakes. So we can't just be resigned and say, well, it's human nature to err. Well, so what? I'll just take it as it comes. Can't do that. And we must move away from the mindset that human error is mystifying, unavoidable, and therefore something we must learn to live with. And I couldn't agree more with this statement, not only in terms of what we're learning in training technology and human factors areas, the tools we have for training, but I don't know if you folks or any of you folks follow what's happening in the leading edge of biotechnology right now. But I do, and they're so close to being able to model in a computer how we make decisions, how we make errors, where the glitches are. And the reason that they're getting so close to being able to model it in a computer is that they're getting so good at looking at it in the brain in different ways with these functional MRIs and everything that we're getting very close. And I'll bet you, within 20 years, this will be a really exact science, this human error thing, and we'll have ways to avoid it almost completely in specialized areas where we can put enough time and effort in to learn how to avoid it. It is time, Kern again, it is time to take a different approach to error and use our mistakes as signposts to improvement. And this is really an important statement for those of us in personal flying. This has already happened over in the professional world. Now we've got to make up our minds to take a different approach. Because if we're talking about improving the safety record, getting personal flying back on the uptrends with number of pilots and activity and so forth, and new airplanes and less cost flying, all that kind of stuff. We're talking about that. We are going to use the same old approach that we've been using to that and the error and the accident prevention, and it hasn't been working. That's one of the definitions of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So Kern's right, we have to do something different. And we believe that airmanship is the different approach that can make the difference here. Personal view from Alan Deal. Now, Alan was a big name for a while back, and I think it was the 70s, NTSB. But before that, he was a U.S. Air Force accident investigator. So he's got a very, very strong background in a big airplane, high-performance accident investigation. He says, aviators don't take full advantage of their mistakes. Aviators don't realize their own vulnerability to the most dangerous types of errors errors of judgment, and decision making. The tendency to hide personal errors must be overcome if we, as a community of aviators, want to fly safer and smarter. So, it's in our nature not to want to make mistakes. It's in our nature not to want to expose our mistakes. But we have to understand that our nature is counter to our longevity in this case. We've got to train ourselves to admit our mistakes and then share those mistakes with the rest of the aviators in our community so that we can all be better and reduce these errors. And so we can't hide them. The system won't work if we do that. But again, I've operated in these kinds of flight operations, these organizations, and it's no big deal. It works fine. And in fact, if the culture is set up right, where it's friendly challenging when errors come up rather than finger pointing and deriding the other person, if you don't allow that and you emphasize the positive reinforcement of sharing mistakes and overcoming and figure out how we're not going to make those mistakes anymore, then sharing those mistakes becomes even more positive. Now, Kern has a few things to say about understanding airmanship error. The challenge of pilot error is conquerable, at least on a personal and individual level. And by that he means we can do this ourselves individually. We can do all these things we're talking about, but maybe not on the organizational level. Maybe we can't get enough current pilots and new pilots to operate this way so that it makes a big difference to the whole community. It'll still make a difference to us personally, and if the smaller group that we're flying within, the organization we're flying in, we all do it this way, we'll be safer, we'll have more fun, it'll be less expensive. But maybe we can't get all of the pilots that are flying for personal reasons to do it this way. So we don't know yet. We don't know if that. I'm encouraged by the results that I'm seeing so far, but who knows? It's too early to tell if we get a large percentage. But I'm convinced that a significant percentage of current pilots are going to do the culture change and start doing it this way. And I think a lot of you who are here this evening share that viewpoint. So we can change it on our own level for sure, and probably, I believe, on the broader level. And Kern says we've already debunked the myth of pilot error as unassailable. In other words, it's you can't do anything about it. That's over and over. That's been proven long ago that you could train out of pilot error. Not totally yet, but you can train a lot way out of it. Also, while organizational approaches may be limited, as individuals, we are the masters of our own fate and error-free future. So the organization can supply you with some tools, but of course that's it's organization, no bucks, no buck Rogers. The tools have to be cost-effective and justified and all that. So that's limited, and it can only do certain things. But it's unlimited what you can do to improve yourself. All right, finally, let's take a look at what are the marks of an airman. What is the kind of person we've been talking about, kind of pilot we've been talking about? What do they look like? Well, Edward Gibbon, the English historian, said way back when, the winds and the waves are always on the side of the ablest navigators. So we all have pilots that we've met that we would say, boy, those guys always know what they're doing. They're the ablest navigators. And it always seems that they get the breaks. Things work out okay for them. Well, that's because they're the ablest. They put all this work in to get that good so that it does look easy, it does come their way. Kern says, there is no cookie cutter for creating good airmen. There is a framework, we believe. There is a format, but there's no cookie cutter. You can't do it the same way for everybody. For all the reasons that we could sit here and name, we all learn differently. We all have different motivations. We all have different resources we can apply. So you can't just have one. This is how this fits everybody. But you certainly can come up, I believe, with a very good approach for everybody individually. They'll be probably 80% the same, but individually they'll be a little bit different. General aviation certification requirements, like the private, commercial, even instrument, do little to inspire an aviator to seek personal achievement. Because once a particular rating or certificate is obtained, the external motivation is gone unless one seeks a higher certificate or rating. So, talked about that before. If your milestones, if your waypoints on that path to excellent airmanship are very far apart, that means there's a lot of time involved to reach that next waypoint. There's a lot of money involved to reach that next waypoint. And there's a big chance to get discouraged, and a big chance to shift priorities, and a big chance to never make it to that next waypoint. Much better to have waypoints that are closer together so that you can make them more rapidly, and you can then feel good, get reinforced by achieving that new airmanship level, and it's easier to go on to the next level. So that's why all that is important. And still talking about the marks of an airman, there are 10 principles and standards of airmanship. Now again, there's a lot more to be looked at in detail on these 10 principles and standards we're going to take a quick look at. So this is just a quick overview to let you know that they're here. There are 10 principles and standards that Kern has outlined that are the marks of an airman. Principle 1, airmanship must be viewed as a whole. So you've got to think of this, working through all of the bedrock principles, the pillars of knowledge, and then the capstone outcomes. You've got to view it as the whole. You can't just view it as, well, let's see, I'll pick proficiency and knowledge of aircraft. That won't work. You've got to have them all. And you got to fill up those pillars of knowledge as much as you can, and you got to keep those bedrock principles just, as polished off as you can, and then you'll get those capstone outcomes of situational awareness and good judgment. So the standard is multidisciplinary competence. In other words, you're not just a good crosswind lander. You're very good at that, and you can shoot that raw data ILS approach down to 200.5 any day of the week. So you got to be good at a lot of things, not just one thing. Principle 2, airmanship demands consistency. So, you are not a good airman if you come out one day and your landings are all grease jobs, and you come out 2 days later and they're all crashes. That's not. You should be consistent. If you have the proper level of proficiency, and your skills are good, and you're disciplined to use the proper procedures and techniques, your landing should always consistently be good. Yeah, you have a less good one every now and then, but you should be consistent. So the standard for consistency, for principle 2, which is consistency, is predictability. And that's not only other people predicting how you're going to fly, but mostly you being able to predict how you're going to fly. But if you are flying with other pilots, then they want to be able to know what you're going to do. They want you to be predictable. Principle 3, airmanship requires balance. So you can't be the greatest turn around a point guy on the base and not be able to hit a checkpoint cross country within 5 miles. So you have to have balance. No weak areas. Weak areas are big danger areas. You have to find any weak areas you may have, but you can't leave them there. The way I visualize it, let's just say on the pillars of knowledge, you have a program that just keeps you moving up those pillars of knowledge pretty much evenly. It's kind of like hydraulic jacks jacking up those capstone outcomes. You want to keep them going up as evenly as you can. You give a little bit of tip, obviously, because you can only devote your resources on one thing or maybe 2 or 3 things at a time on those pillars, but they aren't going to go up perfectly evenly, but you want to keep them as even as possible as you increase your knowledge. So that's one example of no weak areas. Principle 4, specialization is achieved only after balance is achieved. So you've got to have that balance first, be a good all-around airman, and then you specialize. The standard here is broad-based competence. So not only were we okay did we have broad-based competency in a lot of areas, but we're right at the top in all of these areas. Principle 5, airmanship is uncompromising flight discipline. And again, I can't stress this enough. This is really the bedrock principle, and it's the toughest one to achieve on a consistent basis. But it's the one you have to have. Standard there is 0 violations, 0 tolerance for mistakes, errors, laziness, complacency. Now, 0 tolerance doesn't mean you won't ever make a mistake or step over the line, but that has to be your target. 0 tolerance, 0 violations of not only the regs, but of operating procedures and policies and so forth. Principle 6, there is no substitute for flying skill. Remember how quickly those skills deteriorate. Standard, stick and rudder proficiency in all areas of flight and procedural perfection. That's Principle 6. Principle 7, airmanship requires multiple knowledge bases. The standard, instant recall of critical items, so like memory items on your emergency checklist, and sufficient knowledge of self, aircraft, team, environment, and risk to maximize your performance. Principle 8, airmanship is maximizing situational awareness. Standards, there's a couple of them here. Standard components of preparation for maintaining, misspoke there. Understand the components of preparation for maintaining situational awareness. 2, recognize lost SA in yourself and others. And 3, know immediate action steps for recovering from lost SA. So that's Principle 8. You got to have that situational awareness about you at all times. Principle 9, solid airmanship leads to good judgment. The standard for this is consistently sound decision making. Principle 10, good airmanship is contagious. Sharing what you've learned. Talking about the advantages of pursuing airmanship excellence. Talking about the mistakes you've made. All of these things. So I could build a training program that had a check ride at the end of it, and this would be my check ride checklist. In other words, did you live up for the level of airmanship that you want to be, we want you to be at, you want to be at a particular point? Did you meet these 10 principles? Did you meet the standards for these 10 principles? So that's another way to evaluate you in addition to just the stick and rudder skills. So I see somebody's made a comment. I'm sorry I haven't gotten down answer these right away. This is a text message because I have to look over there at this window and have to keep scanning it. So it says that's a culture shift by the regs, and I don't know if that's if you're talking about what I talked about, the handwriting on the wall. But yes, that's one way to do culture shift, and that's usually how culture shifts are done on a rapid basis. Is somebody forces it. You know, in business, you can say, you know, the CEO says, okay, this is how we're going to shift our culture, and then you go through the process and you shift it. Well, we don't have anybody other than ourselves right now to shift the culture in personal flying. But it could be by regulation. I can foresee that. I'm not saying it's going to happen. You know, and you know how hard that process is. It could take forever even if they decide to do it. All I can say is some of those statements by Babbitt look to me like handwriting on the wall. Okay, coming back to Kern's marks of an airman. The cure for the rash of human error accidents and incidents lies at our fingertips. Through self-improvement, we, as aviators, can effect a cultural change in aviation. The essence of what it means to be an airman cannot fall by the wayside. And I would argue that the essence of what it means to be an airman is probably what almost all of us got into aviation for. That's what caught our attention. That's what gave us that motivation to go through all the work we have to learn, all the work we have to do, all the things we have to learn, all the risks we have to take to learn to fly. All right, here's a final perspective by Kern. Although the pursuit of airmanship excellence is by definition an individual project, there are great personal and organizational advantages to sharing your efforts with other aviators. We've talked about some of the safety management system, the fact that we get the errors out there on the table and figure out how to fix them and all that. But also, this is the peer pressure thing. You know, if you go down to the gym by yourself, you're probably going to quit going after about the 6th time. If you go with a group of friends, you might go 7 times or 8 times. But usually with peer pressure, you stay in the game longer. It's more fun. And again, if you have that friendly competition, the positive kind of competition, it's a lot more fun. So sharing all this it will make it work a lot better for you. And Kern says first about this sharing, it is likely that you share local airspace with your colleagues. So it's like out there being on the road. You know, like I always say, geez, if they would just certify me with a Humvee with all the tow anti-tank missiles that I can use up in a week, and I can clear this, I can solve this problem of these idiots out here on the highway, right? Well, it's the same thing here. You know, we've all come up against pilots who are not good airmen. They're not practicing good airmanship. and they cut you off in the pattern or whatever, all kinds of things. And so we really, for our own sake, need to get out here and start telling other pilots about this, and get them on the bandwagon, so they reduce our risk when we're out there in the airspace we're sharing with them. And Kern says, second, it is always easier to stick with an improvement plan if you know that you're not alone in the effort. Finally, we have a moral obligation to share what works in a high-risk endeavor like flying. If we know that there's a problem and we think we might know what the fix is, we're obligated to share that as aviators. And I'm just going to bring up the question again that you're probably getting sick of hearing me flash up here, but again, keep thinking about it, and next session we're going to talk about this and talk about what you've decided. And I'm just going to reiterate the same steps I've been giving you. They're obviously, it's up to you, but complete the series. All 4 of the prior webinars are up at airmanshipexcellence.org in the Airmanship Archives, so if you haven't done them all the webinars, catch up with us, and then do the final webinar next time. Read the book. Can't recommend that too highly. Get in the airmanship loop. Best way to do that is to go to airmanshipexcellence.org and sign up for airmanship updates. I've got one coming out in a couple of days. I'll give you a little advance notice. We're going to have a Airmanship Excellence event, the 3rd one, on December 6th at 1900 in the meeting room at Schaumburg Regional Airport. And we're going to talk about our plan to stand up an Airmanship Development Support Organization demonstrator, and talk about the opportunity that those are really interested in airmanship development and want to get into the game for sure and seriously commit to it. We have what we think is an exciting opportunity for everybody to get in on, and we'll be talking about that. And also, you can get that information later after we make the announcement at that meeting on December 6th if you can't join us there. And you'll find out about it on the blog and through the Airmanship Update. So get in the loop. And as soon as you can, sooner rather than later, commit to a continuous airmanship development plan. So I know we're just over an hour. As you know, I like to reach the gate on time. But I'd like to ask your indulgence here for maybe 5 minutes max, more if you can. Stay with us because I've got 8 poll questions for you. And again, as I mentioned before, these poll questions really help us a lot in evaluating how effective this summit webinar series is. It also helps us to figure out where we're going next. So if you can hang in here just for a couple more minutes, I would appreciate it. And here we come. All right, stand by. I got to get everything opened up. Here we go with the first one. And do you think the Kern airmanship model is a good way to look at airmanship and airmanship development? Or do you think that's too complicated, it's all too much hooey, there's got to be a better way? Or do you think this model is something you can use to develop your airmanship? Okay, votes are coming in. Give you a little bit more time. Not everybody has voted yet. There it is. Everybody's voted. I'm going to close it and share it. So 67% say yes, no no's, and 33% say not sure yet. And as you recall from the last session, those percentages of yeses and not sure yets with hardly any or no no's is about what we've been seeing so far. Okay, let me close that one and get you the second one. Do you think you can use the Kern airmanship model as a flight plan to better situational awareness and judgment? Do you think you can make that work for you to give you what we're all looking at here, the capstone outcomes of better situational awareness and better judgment? Okay, everybody's voted. I'm going to close it, share it with you. And 83% this time say yes, and 17 not sure yet. So pretty close to the same kind of percentages. I hope that those of you who are not sure, you're not sure because you think this is all, we're barking up the wrong tree, and it's just that you're the kind of pilot that's very analytical and you want to see the whole story before you make up your mind. Okay, here's number 3. Do you think there's a possibility that the FAA may impose SMSs on personal flyers? Okay, everybody has voted. I'll close it. Share it with you. Yes, think 42 think yes, 25 no, and 33 not sure. So pretty evenly divided. And I'm with you. I don't think there's a sure bet there at all yet. I'm just saying there might be some handwriting on the wall. So, but I think the 42% that are saying yes, they think they might be the more realistic thinkers here. Okay, I'm hiding that. And I'll do another one here. Here comes the next question. Do you think airmanship challenges, the ones we've been talking about, little steps, close-in waypoints, would motivate you to fly more? Okay, everybody's voted. Wow, look at, oops, I gotta share it with you. Wow, look at that. Yeah, wow, 100%. Very good, very good. Well, that motivates me. That motivates me. Because I believe we can really come up with dynamite flight plans for everybody on how to go for these waypoints that are interesting and fun challenges that keep us improving our airmanship all the time. All right. I'm going to give you another one here. Do you think fun and social activities have a place in airmanship development? Yes, no, or not sure yet? Okay, everybody's voted. And share it. Everybody says yes. I'm glad to hear that because I believe that too. I think we can make this a lot of fun. Okay, there's another one. All right, I just had a little bit of glitch, and I'm wondering if you guys are still seeing the questions. Hang on just one second. Alan, I'm going to open up your mic. Are you there, Alan?
Yes, I'm seeing you.
You're seeing the questions. Okay, I keep my laptop up on the hooked into the webinar so I can see on a separate screen what's going on because I can't see when these questions come up. So, yeah, okay, great. So I'll come back. I may be one off when I come back, but if everybody will hang on, I appreciate it. I'm going to mute your mic, Alan. Thank you. Okay, so I've got, do you think comprehensive airmanship training, and I can't see the rest of that question, but all of you said yes. So I'm going to share the answer with you there. Okay, and I will close that. Now let me see if I can read this. Okay, I'm going to have to read this question before I show it to you. Do you think CFI should stress airmanship training in the flight training they provide? There it is. Okay, everybody's voted. I'll share it with you. 100% said yes. I'll close that one. And we just have one more. Do you think the cure for the rash of human air accidents and incidents lies at our fingertips? Remember, Kern said he thinks that it does. Okay, looks like everybody voted. I'll close it and share it with you. So we had a pretty good split on this one. 67% say yes, and 33% aren't sure yet. Well, again, I thank you very much for taking part in those polls. They help us a lot, and I hope you kind of feel like you're part of the development team here. You're some of the test pilots on staff as we roll this new approach to personal flying out for everyone. Okay, at this point, are there any questions or comments on anything we've covered so far? Just raise your hand if you do, or send me a text message. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I don't see any. I see still a text message talking about technically advanced aircraft, and I'm not sure what that question is. If you'd like to ask it, why don't you raise your hand and I'll open your mic. It's a little too vague for me to, I can come up with a lot of answers to that question, technically advanced aircraft. Okay, no questions. So in session 6, what we're going to look at is this personal airmanship development plan we've been talking about. We're going to look at in detail how you can do it, different ways of doing it, what it can do for you, and all that sort of thing. And we're also going to talk about where do you go from there? Where do we go from there? The end of the webinar series, is this relationship that we've established over with, or are we going to find ways to keep the communication system open so we can talk about these things? Again, if you need to get a hold of me, questions, comments, anything, there's my contact phone number, email address, and of course airmanshipexcellence.org website. You can find all this information too. Well, to wrap up then, thanks for joining me for session 5 of 6, and I hope to see you all at session 6. Till then, fly safe.